Hello and welcome to Full Tech Ahead. I'm your host, Amanda Razani, and today I'm excited to have Josh Koenig. He is the co founder and senior vice president of marketing at Pantheon. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me here, Amanda.
Happy to have you on the show. Can you first share with our audience what does Pantheon do?
Of course. So Pantheon is a website operations platform. And what that means is we run people's websites and we really focus on professional teams and sites that matter. So we're used by thousands of people who build the web as a profession every day, and they support tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of websites that are collectively reaching, well over a billion unique visitors every month. Today, in today's era where there's higher stakes than ever for what's going on with the internet, and what you actually do with the web has a pretty big influence on whether your business or cause or organization will be successful or not. We help teams that need to really professionalize their practices, whether that's trying to work with teams so that you can have projects working in parallel, figuring out how to make releases to your website without putting them at risk, or incorporating AI into your practices. Like, for instance, we support a lot of people running WordPress websites, and as they're trying to introduce an AI as a companion to their team or as part of their development workflow, it's really important that they have version control on every change that gets made. So they understand what change we made, what change was suggested by the LLM. They have a process for reviewing every change that's suggested before it gets released to the site. This is for the code of the site itself, not just for the articles or posts. And Pantheon actually does all this kind of automatically. Every website on Pantheon is under version control, and you can just connect your GitHub account and deploy directly to our platform. You can see a proposed change in a preview environment automatically. It's all set up for you rather than having to have kind of like a DevOps guru on your team that can put all that together. So that's a really exciting place to be. And, in terms of everything that's going on with the web, we have a statistically significant sample of traffic. Like, we can tell what trends are actually happening and sort of what's going on with the weather on the internet. And I don't know, it's a pretty interesting and exciting place to be, as a marketing professional, being able to kind of see how the sausage gets made.
Great. Well, so then you'll have a lot of insight on the impact of AI as far as that traffic goes.
hmm
From your experience, what are some critical things that you're noticing right now?
Well, I think broadly, what is being noticed overall is the pattern of behavior for people to encounter information on the web has changed, and it's still changing, but there's been a sort of a fundamental shift in the last year. The majority of people are no longer searching, they're asking. And they're having an AI, an agent, an LLM sort of start their research and do a bunch of work for them that they would previously have gone to Google and started sifting through all those results themselves. And so in a certain cases where it's like it's a simple answer to a simple question, they're not going to go to anybody's website at all. They're just probably going to get the answer and move on with their lives. If it's a more complicated type of process or a higher stakes question that they're trying to figure out, then they're going to still encounter the websites that they're going to be researching, but it'll be a different stage in their journey. And practically, what that means in the data is you can just see, kind of traffic to websites as a direct result of a search, a referral, an organic visit, what we call it. Those are down, and they're down a lot, depending on what site you're looking at. I mean, this has really impacted, I think, clickbait more than anything else. RIP clickbait, but that's not the worst thing in the world. But it is really difficult for people who use organic SEO as a source of their demand. This has also impacted the cost per click on most paid platforms as well, because there's just fewer clicks to go around, which means the cost is going up quite a lot. And but the other thing that's true is these visits that are coming in. These are people that are already, they're already midway through their journey, perhaps, before they're encountering, your site, your property, which means they're primed. They're probably ready to go for whatever it is they're trying to figure out. And despite all the hype, OpenAI has quietly walked back their whole like let ChatGPT buy it for you thing, because it frankly didn't work. Despite what may be possible, who can say where we'll be 5 years from now? But the reality is today, when it comes to meaningful action, people still take that action themselves. We're not at a point where you can just let an agent do everything for you. And so when those visitors are reaching your site, they're further along. They're ready to go. They're ready to buy. They have a question that the agent couldn't answer for them. They're looking to get into the details to potentially do some more comparison or verification. And so those experiences that you can deliver when that person does arrive are actually more critical than ever before. And it kind of raises the stakes or deepens the challenge of digital marketing, because it's not just like throw up a flashy landing page and have the right CTA to get someone to like view a second page or so forth. It's like when someone shows up, they have a purpose, and you really have to meet them where they are and carry that journey forward from there. So again, like this is all kind of turning things upside down in the biz, and we're certainly not done with change yet, but we're starting to see some pretty solid patterns emerge in terms of what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many questions. You shared a lot there. So let's rewind. First of all, so the customer expectation,
Hmm.
they're expecting that aid from an AI source. So should companies take note of this and be integrating some sort of AI tools onto their website if they don't already have one?
That's a really interesting question. And I have a little bit of a contrarian take on this, which is that trying to beat ChatGPT or Claude at its own game on your website is probably not smart. Right, the chatbot experience. Now there is validity in having, like, if you have customer service or support and figuring out how to scale your team and be able to answer more questions quickly. Like, you can do a lot with those tools, and that's very valid. But I think there's this notion that, like, the whole experience, just because ChatGPT is here, people want to chat with every website. That's not being borne out in reality. And the fact is that the leading AI labs, Anthropic, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Claude, and Google Gemini, they've got massive teams that are devoted to making that product experience delightful. And that's part of why they're so popular, is because they are really well done. And replicating that quality of experience on your own is hard. And so I don't think, like, turning your website into a chat experience primarily is going to work very well for people. The places where I think you can leverage this technology to do better, again, customer service. This is becoming pretty well trod. People who have overdone it a bit by, like, trying not to have people to do customer service and only have AI, and that doesn't work. But figuring out how to give quicker responses that are more on target, and have humans in the loop to oversee customer service and support clearly works. And the other is, if someone is doing content search on your site, rethinking that experience a little bit, because the audience out there is being primed by what they're getting from Google in terms of an AI overview. And that, if done right, now this is tricky because you got to put some work into thinking about designing that experience and what content you have to bring to bear. But an AI overview in search on your site is also something that is showing a lot of promise. The other thing is, again, rather than trying to, like, turn your site into a chatbot, the other thing to think about, though, is just what the overall expectations around user experience, navigation, layout. Again, like, a lot of the stuff that we do with websites is based on patterns that are, well over 10 years old in terms of how we think about menus and navigation and other stuff. So I think that there's a lot of room for experimentation with design. I just don't think it's a good idea to try to make your site its own, chat GPT experience.
Hmm. Okay. So, and then something else you said, people are used to focusing on SEO.
Mhm.
So that's kind of, it seems like it's going out the door in favor of more AI optimization. So, what tips or advice do you have for business leaders as far as how do they make sure that they're reaching those AI optimization key points?
Yeah, that is probably one of the most critical questions right now. And disclaimer up front, TLDR, we don't really know for sure, because the models all work differently and they're all changing pretty rapidly. However, people have been working on this pretty hard for a couple of years now, and again, some core underlying patterns are emerging. So the good news is, we've had decades of having a machine audience for websites with SEO, like that's always been a part of the practice. And a lot of a lot of the core underlying things that you should be doing for SEO also work, and it's good for AI it's just another crawler on some level. So having your website be well structured and so forth is a good idea. I think things that are emerging as perhaps more important than ever is the sidebar. These are also things that are good for human visitors too. So it's not like you do like bizarre, weird things to appease the artificial intelligence, and like it's not helping you out with your regular visitors. More important than ever, the speed of the website really does appear to matter. Like highly cited sources in AI overviews on average are 30 to 40% faster in delivering responses than ones that aren't cited. And this is both because that sends us a trust signal in, just like it did with Google. Having a faster website would help you rank more highly. But also, a lot of times when the user types in a question and the little bot is like thinking, it's actually searching the web and trying to scan for like current information, because the model's sort of training data is inevitably out of date, right? It's from before. And so if there's any kind of query that involves up-to-date information, the AI is going to try to refresh that in real time. And as like I said before, there's legions of engineers and product designers trying to make that experience for the end user as delightful and sticky as possible. They don't want to make that user wait. And so if your website is slow, like, Claude just basically will give up and not wait on the response, just like humans will, though. Like, if your website is slow, they'll whoop, swipe, I'm done. I don't that moving on. That didn't answer my question. So speed is more important than ever. And then the other thing that's more important than ever is structured, high quality content. And this is actually where, I mean, let's be honest, when people are doing SEO content, very often they're not producing the highest quality, most insightful, differentiated breakthrough stuff. They're trying to be relevant in the eyes of Google on a topic in general. And the truth is, that is the kind of content that an LLM can just spit out now. It's not differentiating. It's not providing a distinct point of view. And often, it's just like overly long and wordy because it wants to mention a keyword as many times as possible. That type of content doesn't really help you with an AI. What does help you is structuring your content as more like a question and answer, because that does appear to have some influence in how things get cited. In just making the text really clear, like having your headings be used properly, H1, H2, H3, and building and if your documents follow kind of a clear outline, that will help it be more likely to be digested. The other thing that really helps, and this is not about your site, but it has been a cornerstone of digital marketing, like I mentioned question and answer before, these tools take review sites and what people say about stuff online in forums, like famously Reddit, but not just Reddit. It takes those things pretty seriously. And so, having a good presence, making sure you're looking after how you show up in reviews, how you're discussed online in third-party sources, also really important. If anybody asks about your company by name, you can bet that the bots will be filtering a bunch of those Q&As into the results. So, those are three things that we know for sure. There's a lot of other stuff that's out there that, may matter more, may matter less, like the whole, LLMs.txt, we're up in the air as to whether that really helps or doesn't. There's a bunch of stuff that like the internet giants are playing around with, but it's kind of inconclusive. But we can say for sure that having a speedy website with well-structured content and good reviews online will help you out tremendously in AI. And guess what? You need those things anyway.
Yes. Yeah. And I think another part of this is I'm seeing more and more people say that they're very tired of what they call AI slop. It seems to be more and more noticeable, dry, bland, different phrases that are used over and over again. People are getting tired of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the what this technology can do with very little effort is produce replacement level, median, middle of the road copy. And, again, like under time pressure and volume pressure, historically, great firms and wonderful people have had to crank out replacement level median quality copy, but now the cost of it has gone down to almost zero and it can be done automatically. And so what you have as a result of that is like one of the sources I'm working on a whole data study around this based on what we can see with our traffic and a few other things from specifically looking into AI optimization. And one of the sources is a study a guy did just to see how quickly things got picked up. But his case for his study was, well, I had to make a website to do this, so I don't remember which one he used, but he had an AI build like a 60,000 article website with a bunch of like tips and tricks for like how to do better digital marketing, I think. And he said, it ended up costing about like $13 in token consumption, and it took about 2 hours. And it's just, and if you look at you look at the site that he made, it's like, oh, this is really bland, it's super forgettable, but it worked as a test of how quickly do things crawl a new website. And so at the end of the day, like, bland stuff is just now ubiquitous. Like, we're just flooded. The zone has been flooded with forgettable content. And the thing about that is, it doesn't hook anyone's attention. It doesn't have a point of view. If you're in the game of marketing, you have to do two things, ideally both at the same time, which is to educate and entertain. Put those things together and you've got great marketing. And you can certainly use AI to help with that. It's not saying that this should never a tool that shouldn't be used. Obviously, this is changing, any practice that uses language is being changed by this. But you have to be very tasteful about how you use it, how you leverage it in your content production process. And if you don't start with a point of view, an opinion, and a voice, then what's going to come out on the other side is just going to be more of that noise. And so that's really the challenge, is like, how do you create something that's worth spending time on? And then, secondarily or primarily, you got to have something that's worth spending time on. And then secondarily, you've got to get people's eyeballs to it. But again, same as it ever was, right?
Yes, absolutely. So my last question would be, knowing all of this, what tips or advice do you have for business leaders as far as how can they track metrics? You said they're dwindling now. There's less people actually coming to their sites, and people are used to, they ask for this data for their media kits to show their value. And if that's dwindling, how can they track? Where can they make that up?
Well, so I think there's a couple of different things that are happening. There's a third factor in the stats that I didn't mention before because it's actually been going on for longer. But just like the pendulum is swinging back towards people having privacy online, which as an end user of the internet, I actually think is good. But the flip side of it is Google Analytics no longer reliable. Right? It's not going to show you people who opt out of your consent framework. It's not going to show you people who have their browser settings turned up or who have a plugin for privacy. Like, there's just a lot of people that are not going to be measured the way that tool measures, because it requires them to opt in and consent to a rather invasive use of the data. And so I think we're going to see this is not really usable yet, but you're starting to see it with like Cloudflare's put up like their first stab at an analytics framework. We're actually working on something very similar at Pantheon, and I think others are as well, where when you have part of your tech stack that can actually measure just the full click stream, like every single interaction with the site, and then can give you data from there, that's then a useful sort of source. And that's kind of what we look at. We can tell how much is happening with like the AI crawlers, how much is happening with stuff that like it doesn't identify as a crawler but doesn't really look authentic either, and then how much of this traffic really does look like it's valid human traffic, whether or not they're letting themselves be cookied or not. And so I think that is kind of a like live active development work that's happening on several fronts right now. But I believe that these are going to be the tools people will need, particularly if they're just trying to demonstrate like high level value. Like, yes, we are actually getting people engaged with our content. In fact, like, you're going to be able to measure how often your web site was live queried by AI. And that's a valuable metric. That means that like people are asking questions and your site is part of the response. Now it's not the same as getting them to your site itself, but it's still, that is a good signal, right? So all those things are just starting to come together now, and I think people that are eager to have the answers to those questions will have more and more, later this year, honestly, as these tools really do start to come together.
Great. Well, if there was one key takeaway you could leave our audience with today, what would that be?
I think the key takeaway is fundamentals are what matter more than ever. It's easy to get spun up in the middle of this giant hype cycle that we're in and think that everything is changing and forget what you knew and so on and so forth. And look, everything is changing, but some things, don't. Right? Having your website be fast, having your content be good, having a team that can move quickly without breaking things, like that's how you keep up with a rapidly changing environment. And that's what we exist to help people do. So I'm happy to just talk about it. It's a great story.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Amanda. This was a pleasure.
And thank you to our audience. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave those and I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. Have a wonderful day.